Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. I've had issues with my neighbor Karen ever since she moved in next door about a year ago. She's one of those stereotypical Karens. Blonde, always asking to speak to the manager, and just an all-around nightmare to deal with. The latest problem started a few months ago when Karen started having big gatherings at her house on the weekends. She'd invite over tons of friends, and their cars would line the whole street, blocking driveways and making it impossible to navigate the neighborhood. My house is right next to Karen's, so whenever she had these parties, no one could get in or out of my driveway. I'd come home from work to find a huge SUV parked right in front of my garage. A few times I had to ask Karen's friends to move their cars so I could actually pull in. They weren't too happy about it. After weeks of this, I finally went over to Karen's one Saturday afternoon and politely asked if she could please ask her guests not to block my driveway. I explained how it prevented me from accessing my own home and garage. Karen got really huffy and said there was nothing she could do. She claimed it was a public street and her friends could park wherever they wanted. I told her to have some common courtesy, but she slammed the door in my face. The very next Saturday, sure enough, I came home to find a big black SUV parked right in front of my driveway again. I saw the house was full of people for another one of Karen's parties. I knocked on Karen's front door and asked her to move the SUV. She said she was busy and would do it later. A few hours went by and it was still there. By now I was pretty angry. I went back over and told Karen if she didn't move the car immediately, I would have it towed. "Go right ahead," she yelled. "It's not up to me where people park. Call the cops for all I care." So that's exactly what I did. I called the local police department's non-emergency line and explained the situation. About 20 minutes later, an officer came by and politely asked the owner of the SUV to move their car so I could get into my driveway. Karen was pissed. As soon as the cop left, she stormed across the lawn and got right in my face, screaming about how I humiliated her in front of her friends. I told her to back off and reminded her I had asked nicely multiple times before calling the police. "You'll regret this," she shouted before stomping back to her house. The following weekend, I made sure to park my own car a little further down the street, leaving enough room so my driveway wouldn't get blocked. But when I returned that evening, I was shocked to find Karen's big white SUV parked perpendicular right across my driveway. She had clearly done it intentionally to block me in. I banged on Karen's front door, but no one answered. Her SUV was wedged in at an angle. There was no way I could maneuver around it. And she had done it so the back end stuck out into the street, preventing a tow truck from getting access either. After thinking it over, I decided to just leave my car where it was and get an Uber home. I figured Karen was trying to provoke me, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. The next morning, I went outside to find Karen standing in my driveway looking very smug. "Sorry about blocking your precious driveway," she said sarcastically, "but that's what happens when you call the cops on my friends." I told Karen she couldn't keep using her car to intentionally trap me in my own garage. She needed to cut it out, or I'd have to take legal action. Karen got a crazy look in her eye. "I'll show you legal action," she spat. She got in her SUV, revved the engine loudly, and then, to my utter shock, drove straight into my fence, smashing through the brick columns and leaving a huge gaping hole. I thought about calling the police again, but something told me they wouldn't be able to help much in this situation. So I went to small claims court and filed paperwork to sue Karen for the damage to my property. The judge heard my testimony along with Karen's excuse that it was just an accident. But when I showed him the police report from the previous weekend, plus photos showing how Karen's SUV was wedged in at an angle, he agreed it was clearly intentional. Karen ended up having to pay me over $5,000 to replace the demolished fence and pillars. The judge also barred her from parking anywhere near my driveway again. Karen gave me a death stare as we left the courtroom. She knew I had beat her at her own game. After that, anytime I saw her outside, she would quickly scurry back into her house. I can't say I miss interacting with her too much. I'm just glad I finally got some justice after months of Karen aggravating me. She learned the hard way that you can't go around damaging other people's property without consequences. My new fence looks better than ever, too. The next one is a pro-revenge story. The setup is that I was working for a local county government in the permitting department that handled drainage and floodplain enforcement. I received a complaint from a homeowner, a nice guy, who lived next door to a house that was part of an incorporated village. Not a nice guy. The nice guy lived in an unincorporated portion of the county, and hence the call came to me as an agent of the county. I drove out to the site to investigate and discovered some interesting facts. The permitting agent for the village allowed the incorporated homeowner to fill his lot, affecting the drainage, which caused the unincorporated lot to flood every time there was anything more than light rain. The nice guy indicated that there was some tension between him and the not nice guy, and part of the issue was that the nice guy and his partner were a gay couple. This raised a red flag for me, but in trying to be impartial, I took the information and some photos for the file and indicated that I would contact the village to find a resolution. I wrote a letter and then called the village inspector, a jackwagon, to discuss. Jackwagon told me that the village could do as it pleased, and that I could do nothing to stop the not nice guy from doing as they pleased, as it was approved by the village. There was also a comment about those types of people, the gay couple, making complaints just to cause trouble. I was now on the case, and it was time to make sure everything done on the incorporated lot was 100% legal. At this point, the game was certainly on, because if there is one thing that grinds my gears, it is bullying. I went back out and spoke to the nice guy to let them know what I was up to, and that I was not going to let this slide. I then started investigating the elevations on the two lots and what fill had been placed on the incorporated lot. The not nice guy came out and started getting belligerent about my presence and ongoing investigation. He incorrectly stated that I did not have jurisdiction over his lot, and that he would be calling the police. I patiently listened and then pulled out my two-way radio and requested that the home base dispatch both a village and a county police unit to the location. I then indicated that since there was a regulatory floodplain on his lot, I did in fact have jurisdiction, and that I would be exercising my right to determine the impact of his fill activities upon that floodplain. Both of the police units showed up, and I let them know what was going on. They were both appropriately agitated to have to waste their time and let the not nice guy know that I was within my authority to proceed with the investigation. A little while later, while I was measuring things, Jackwagon showed up. He started berating me about harassing the village resident and threatening to call my boss and file a complaint, and so forth. I invited him to do so, quoting which parts of the code he should indicate I was violating. I was using marking paint to show the limits of the floodplain for the photos for the file, and what do you know, Jackwagon's shoe got painted when he tried to stop me. Obviously, he was even more angry, as was the homeowner, due to the very bright orange paint in the grass in his yard. I pointed out that I had done the same on the neighboring lots, but they just kept complaining. It was actually marking chalk that comes off pretty easily. Interestingly, I found two really wrong things on the not nice guy's lot. 1, there was fill placed in the floodplain, and 2, a garden shed was built on the fill and partially within the floodplain. Both are a big no-no and are actually against federal law. So the course of action had 2 parts. 1, make the incorporated homeowner remove the fill and shed from the floodplain, and 2, let the nice guy place fill on their lot outside of the floodplain to counteract the fill remaining on the not nice guy's lot outside of the floodplain. I also told the nice guy it would be a good idea to run a field tile on their side to drain the water that would inevitably pond up between the two lots when it rained. Predictably, the not nice guy and Jackwagon got super angry when I sent the letter out that there were violations that either had to be corrected, remove fill and shed, or apply for a revision of the floodplain with the Army Corps of Engineers. Good luck with that. This then led to a meeting at the county office with the not nice guy, Jackwagon, my supervisor, and myself. Quickly things went to 11, and there was yelling by Jackwagon about the abuse of power, etc. The department head came into the conference room and told them both they were wrong, and that they should leave peacefully and comply or face the consequences. Fines. The best part was that the not nice guy had to apply for a permit, and guess who was the one to review and approve it? That's right, yours truly. Now, I was following the letter of the law, but you have to know that poor government workers are underpaid and overworked. Strangely, the permit for the nice guy was almost immediately approved, while the not nice guy had to undergo a very thorough review to ensure it was correct. You could make a case that I was abusing my power, but I can assure you that the timing for their review was well within acceptable limits. Also, how could I be held to account that they misfiled 3 times before they finally got it right? Generally, if you behaved like a civil human and came to the office, we would help you get things done properly so the permit would go through the first time. But the not nice guy decided he could do it all on his own, so it took him 3 tries. Had he come to the office, I would have given him the same service as others, but he decided to take the hard route, and therefore I didn't give a single inch when it came to the submission being perfectly correct. Ultimately, the situation was resolved, but it took a lot more effort than it should have. The moral of the story? Don't be an entitled homophobic a-hole. The next one is a petty revenge story. When I was 20, I started a job as a teller at Wells Fargo. At the specific location, it was a trailer. Or that's what we called it anyway. Just picture a super long, skinny building. Also, this was only for the drive-thru. It was located next to the actual bank. This drive-thru had 8 drive-ups and 2 pull-ups for merchants. The merchant pull-ups were literally on the building and the others were in front. Picture a Sonic fast food place. 4 of the drive-ups were on one side of the trailer and another on the other side. It took at least 5 of us to man this on a slow day. Well, one day, my boss let everyone go to lunch at once, except for 3 of us, myself, Kim, and Jessica. My half of the trailer, where I was completely by myself, had to man the 4 drive-thrus and the merchant. If you know, doing the merchant is time-consuming. There's typically a lot of cash being deposited, which takes time obviously to count, etc. Well, on this day, Kim and Jessica just didn't feel like working. They literally just sat there as I was trying to help 5 separate people at once. Jessica walks over and tells me to hurry up because people are waiting. I looked at her in disbelief. I asked her to help, while Kim just sat there staring at me. I got so pissed off I called Jessica idiot straight up. Well, my idiot boss comes back from her lunch and Jessica goes straight to her and complains about me. I got written up. My boss could not have cared less about the circumstances, oblivious to the lack of scheduling on her part. Whatever. Anyway, I ended up getting fired because Jessica just couldn't let it go. She was traumatized. Also, it didn't help that my boss kept making me work the merchant lane. If you know about being a teller, you know that being a merchant teller requires experience. This was my first teller job ever. Okay, so the fun part. Years later, I opened an account at a local credit union. It was just an account for fun money. I totally forgot about it after like a year and realized it was in the negative. Can't even remember how that happened, but it was literally like $3. So I go in to take care of it, and lo and behold, there's Jessica. She immediately recognized me. I go to the counter, and another girl pulls up my account. I immediately tell her why I'm there, of course. Well, Jessica sees this as an opportunity to embarrass me. Also, there are at least 4 other account holders in the small lobby. The teller that's helping me had to call a number to reset the account. Well, Jessica walks over, leans over this girl, and loudly says, her account is in the negative, she needs to pay that first, and then glares at me and smirks. Oh, hell no. So I let the girl finish the call and get things squared away, getting my account to a $100 balance. Not much, but again, this is just my fun money account. I head out the door, and damned be me, I run into the branch manager. I tell her about Jessica and that I was considering closing my account over it. About 2 hours later, I get a call from the branch manager, and she apologizes profusely and tells me Jessica had been let go because it wasn't the first complaint about her, and not the first time she had been unprofessional. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened to one of my cousins. Let's call him Tim for the sake of the story. And it involves something he did to his mom. Tim's mom is a bit of an attention seeker, and always wants validation for every single thing she does. She frequently complains that she doesn't receive enough appreciation in the house, even though some of the things she does are just basic common sense. So one day, after another round of annoying complaints and moans from his mother, Tim sarcastically asked her, "Wow, amazing. You did a great job. You want a trophy for that?" His mom, angered by his sarcasm, blurted out, "Yes, maybe I deserve a trophy for everything I've done in this house." Cue malicious compliance. Tim went to one of those warehouse stores that sell a whole bunch of knickknacks and found a huge box of tiny toy plastic trophies sold at a bargain price. He bought the whole box and monitored his mom. It started with things like when she did the laundry, cooked dinner, or cleaned the house. He would give her a trophy, making a huge fanfare about it. with celebratory music in the background and him giving her the cringiest and most exaggerated congratulations for a job well done. Then it moved on to more mundane things, like if she sneezed, coughed, went to the toilet, took a bath, or even when she ate or drank anything. Every single thing she did, he would give her a trophy with all the works. It even got to the point where he would spring into her room to give her a trophy just for waking up in the morning and successfully turning off the alarm. Tim continued this for almost 2 weeks until her dresser was completely filled with his tiny trophies, and his mom's face looked like she was about to explode, raining the fear of God on him when she saw those annoying trophies. Luckily for him, Tim's dad reminded Tim's mom that she was the one who asked for it. He was there when Tim and his mom had their first argument that started all this, and that Tim was only doing as she had asked. She begrudgingly told Tim to get rid of all the trophies, though I can't remember what Tim said he did with them. It didn't really stop her from being an attention seeker, but she never dared to call Tim's bluff again. The next one is an entitled people story. I, 39F, often semi-joke that I am cursed with an overabundance of aunts. While this could be taken as literal truth, I once had a total of 14 aunts, biological plus by marriage, some have passed away. My not really a joke refers to 5 aunts who have gone above and beyond to make life miserable in recent years. 3 of them feature in this story. We'll call them Aunt Jo, Aunt Lynn, and Aunt Rose, not their real names, obviously. Quick background on our cast of troublesome aunts. Aunt Jo, my late father's younger sister, with whom he was always very close. She's an ultra-fundamentalist Christian who went full MAGA in 2016 and subsequently fell victim to the QAnon brain-decimating virus. I actually used to really enjoy being with her, but she's so insane now that I've sadly had to sever all contact. Aunt Rose and Aunt Lynn, 2 of my mother's younger sisters. They used to be a lot of fun, especially Aunt Lynn. She was my favorite of all my aunts for years. Both have grown increasingly sharp-tongued and entitled over the past 20 years or so. I noticed verbal barbs from Aunt Rose and Aunt Lynn towards me here and there for years, but I guess I used to shrug it off because they're critical of nearly all my cousins as well. I started to sense outright resentment from both after I finished grad school. This particular story concerns my aunt's behavior after my father died a couple of years ago. My dad had Alzheimer's, among other problems, so I moved in with him and my mom to help care for him once he became too much for Mom to handle on her own. For almost 2 years, I put my life on hold to take care of Dad. I found it very lonely and difficult at times, but it felt to me like the only moral choice I could make, and I have no regrets. The pandemic exacerbated my dad's mental and physical decline, and after a series of traumatic falls, he developed a brain bleed and had to be sent to a hospital out of state. There were no hospital beds left near us because of the pandemic. He spent the last 2 weeks of his life alone in that hospital before he finally passed away. Losing my dad that way was excruciating. My mother and I were both quite weak from long COVID at the time. We were sick for 9 months, and having the end happen the way it did, not getting to see him or say goodbye after being his daily caregiver for nearly 2 years, was so hard. My mother was quite frail right then, so I had to take the lead on making the calls and decisions after Dad died. Thankfully, Dad had always been very clear about exactly what he wanted. Cremation, no funeral, no obituary. I followed his wishes to the letter. The day after my dad died, Aunt Jo called to talk to Mom. I assumed she was offering condolences since she and my mom had been friends since high school. Nope. Aunt Jo deemed it essential to inform my grieving mother that her husband of 52 years was now in hell because of her, since she didn't make him go to church. She went on and on, telling Mom, "His blood is on your hands." Mom tried to no avail to remind her that Dad staunchly refused to go to church with us for years and years. Aunt Jo became more impassioned, reminded Mom that, according to Aunt Jo, she and I are both agents of Satan who lost our salvation because we didn't vote for Trump, and finally hung up. Mom was naturally an emotional wreck. 2 days after Dad died, Aunt Lynn and Aunt Rose ganged up on me in a family group chat to harass me about not writing an obituary. I was operating in a mechanical survival mode where I had not yet allowed myself to cry, and I had not even begun to touch the trauma from the way in which my dad died. My aunts kept on at me for an entire morning until I finally responded that they could write the blasted obituary if it was that important to them. I ignored the group chat after that. The very next day, I went over to visit Aunt Lynn. She lives about 15 minutes from my mom. I really needed some support because I was carrying so much right then. I was also hoping to get her to understand about the obituary since Dad had been so adamant about not wanting one. Mom also didn't want one. Moreover, I knew right then that I could not emotionally handle having to write one. Instead of offering any understanding, Aunt Lynn spent over an hour berating and lecturing me for not mourning in the way she wanted me to. She accused me of being cold and unloving because I had not cried in front of her. She called me an ungrateful, hateful, spoiled daughter. I tried to explain that crying is something very private to me, and that I had to remain strong to take care of Mom right then, but that made her angrier. I broke when I got home from that visit. All my misplaced guilt and grief came flooding out, and I felt more alone than ever before in my life. As punishment over the obituary issue, Aunt Rose and Aunt Lynn then ceased all communication with both me and Mom for over a week. Complete silence, complete abandonment, and mind you, Mom, their own sister, had done nothing to them and had just lost her husband of 52 years. She was so frail and so affected by the lack of support that I thought I would likely lose her too within a matter of weeks. She could barely speak coherently in the condition she was in and refused to eat. I finally told off both aunts via text and said they needed to support their sister. They broke their silence with her, but not with me after that. Eventually, after a few more weeks, my aunts thawed towards me and we returned to somewhat friendly relations. I never got an apology, but I also knew better than to expect one. I dread what my aunts will put me through when I eventually lose my mother, hopefully not for years. At least I now have my husband to support me when, not if, that day comes. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.